Thank you for listening to the Fantasy Writers Toolshed. If you'd like to join our writing community on Discord and get access to fantasy writing classes and books on Patreon, check the links in the description. And if you don't want to miss any future episodes, be sure to follow or subscribe. And to support the show, leave a quick rating on Spotify or iTunes and share this episode on social media or with anyone who you think may be interested. Thank you very much for listening. Enjoy the show. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Writers Toolshed. I'm your host Richie Billing, and today I'm delighted to welcome back to the show for this hat-trick appearance is Stephen Aryan. Stephen, how are you doing?
I'm good, thanks. Thanks for having me back for my third time. Third time's a charm.
I know. Well, it's such a big field, isn't it? And today we're going to be looking specifically at query letters, because you have written a book which covered this in the past, which is really interesting book as well. But since you've been last on the show, you've had quite a lot of books out, haven't you?
Probably, yes.
What has been going on?
So where are we up to? So now, we're now in 2026. Last year in May, the third and final book in my latest trilogy, historical fantasy, The Nightingale and the Falcon, came out. So that wraps that series up. That was book 11. So that's all done. I'm now working on some new stuff that'll then go out on sub, and then we'll see what happens. If it gets picked up, it'll be next year that it comes out. So I've got this year to do editing, writing something new, cracking on with my second self-published novella. So yeah, it doesn't slow down. It's just a shift, really.
Yeah, and doing plenty of events as well, you were saying before.
Yeah, I've got a few events coming up in the UK. I'm not doing any of the main conventions this year. I'm not doing EasterCon or FantasyCon, but I will be at the Spotlight Indie, a one-day event in Shrewsbury, which is in May. So I'll be there on panels talking about writing and a bit of self-publishing stuff with lots of other indie authors. So that's the only sort of event I'm doing at the moment.
Nice, very good. So, one of the reasons why I wanted to invite you back onto the show is because recently you've started a service where you've been helping people with query letters.
Yes.
The very scary things that are query letters. And in the past, you've got a book, haven't you, called Good and Bad Advice About Writing and Getting Traditionally Published. And I think in the back of that book, you've got your query letter.
Yes.
That, so you get an agent, which is very, very kind of you to share. So, but I personally, like, if someone talks about query letters, so it's a bit of a minefield, isn't it? There's like loads of, it's not like if you're coming into it with like sort of from the experience of like writing short stories, like the cover letters there are quite simple, and what I've heard, people don't even read them, so they're a bit inconsequential. Whereas a query letter is a different behemoth altogether, isn't it?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
can
it's
you
really
tell us
important.
a bit about what it is? Like,
Yeah, so when I started out, there wasn't any advice on how, what to write. You just kind of had to shoot in the dark and have a go. Now there's lots of advice out there, and some of it's conflicting, but it's as long as you cover the basics, as long as you don't do anything too weird, then I think it'll stand you in good stead. One of the mistakes that people make with a query letter is they think it is a chance for them to show off their personality. When you send your query letter in to an agent, think of it more like it's a job interview. In theory, if you get an agent, you will be in a working business relationship with this individual for several years, potentially for a lot longer. Some people do move around agents, but you got to kind of think about, this person is going to be on your side, your champion. And when they don't know you, like, friendship might develop. You might just have a strictly business relationship. It really depends on the individual, how they work and who you are and so on. But when they see that query letter, when the stuff comes in, the only thing they actually care about is the material. They're not looking for something quirky. They're not wanting you to send it on colored paper. They're not wanting you to write it all in caps or try and crack jokes. They're not looking for you to have done their homework on them in terms of saying, oh, well, I know you're a big fan of Hamilton, and blah. I'm thinking, how did they know that? Unless you've been stalking them on their social media and things. So In that first moment, the query letter is you setting out your stall, showing that you've done your homework in terms of if they ask for certain kind of requirements, you've met them specifically. You've got their name right. You've got their gender right. You've got the number of chapters and all the number of words they've asked for right. Because every agent gets thousands of queries every year, and they can only take on a handful of clients because their first job is to look after existing clients. Their second job is to try and get new clients, but they have to fit that in around the existing work. So they're never taking on hundreds of new clients. So if they get 8,000 submissions a year and you write something and it's just dear sir / madam, it shows straight away you haven't bothered to do your homework. They'll just delete it and move on. Because if you can't be bothered to do a little bit of work, a little bit of effort to show that you care as much about this interview process as you do your book, it sets a very bad first impression. And they haven't got time to email you back. Like if they say, send me 3 chapters and you only send them the first, they haven't got time to email you and say, oh, can you send me chapters 2 and 3? They'll just delete it and move on. So you want to give them as few excuses as possible to not read your email. You want them to be like, right, I've asked for A, B, C, D, E, F, and G, and you've ticked every single box. You've got absolutely everything right. That's what they want to see. Don't be quirky. Don't be silly. Don't be weird. Don't be creepy. Just go in, and the only thing they care about is this book the genres that I cover? If you write fantasy and, the only thing they cover is romance, there again, you say, oh, I'm the exception to it. It doesn't matter. There are other agents who will read that stuff. So it's all about, you have to do a lot of work up front. I know people say, oh, it sounds like a lot of effort. Yeah, it is. It is. But then again, writing a book is a lot of effort. Getting a book published is a lot of effort. Staying published is a huge amount of effort. So if you don't like hard work, being a writer is not the game to be.
So if we were sort of going through the process of drafting the query letter, I think you said, well, you just said that there towards the end, it begins with the research and looking into the agent and making sure they're a good fit. So can you talk us through how people should approach that?
So there's lots of ways and lots of information you can find out about the right agent to match your book. In terms of, you have to know what genre your book is, and then what the audience is. So is it middle grade? Is it young adult? Is it new adult? Is it adult audience? Once you know that, you have to know what genre it is. You also have to know comp or comparison titles, which is very important part of the query process, but also it's important in terms of selling the book, which is what the agent will do for you. So you need to be reading within the genre that you're writing, or at best have a very good knowledge of what's going on. Because we'll come on to this, but when you give your comparison titles, it has to be something that's recent. And unless you're tracking all of the news and reading stuff, you don't know what's going on. You can't compare your book to Lord of the Rings meets this, meets that. Anything that's more than 5 years old is too old. Now some people are saying anything more than 2 years old is too old. I've spoken to different agents. It has to be within that kind of field of range. So you say your book is, I've written a standalone fantasy novel. It's for adults. It's 110,000 words. It's compared to, The Bone Ships meets so-and-so. These two books that are firmly within the right genre that fit perfectly with what they're after. That's how it kind of works. Yeah. It's all about being current.
Yeah, I suppose that market moves quite quickly as well with different trends and things like that. So it a really good lesson coming from that is you've always got to be reading and keeping an eye on new books that are coming out, I suppose.
Definitely. Yeah. So you have to be aware. Like if you don't know who, you can't just off the top of your head name who some of the biggest authors are in your genre, then that's not good. You need to be able to kind of just rattle them off. And you don't have to have read all of what they've done. You don't need to read, maybe one book or borrow a book from the library and just get a feel for what they write and how they write. Because even if your book is similar to a certain person and you're not particularly, you haven't read a lot of their stuff, if you can reference them, that's what's important. In terms of where you go to get the agents. So there are lots of different resources like Query Tracker and Agent Tracker, the Writers and Artists Yearbook that started off as this big kind of Bible-like tome, which you can still get as a physical book. You can borrow them from the library. That's the first great step. But now the Writer's and Artist's Yearbook is online. So
Nice.
you can pay an annual like fee and you get access to all of the information immediately without having to buy the book. This will
Yes.
give you information on all of the agencies, all of the agents, all of their contact information, what genres they cover. And that's only the first step. The second step is then you do the homework in terms of, are they still looking for that kind of thing? Is the agent currently open when you're about to submit the book? What are their particular specifications in terms of a one-page synopsis or two-page? Do they want a one-page query letter or longer? 3 chapters, 5 chapters, 10,000 words, wherever it might be. You have to go through and create a short list of agents that you're then going to target. Another way is if you are reading books within your genre, what you'll sometimes find is in the acknowledgements or the thanks section, writers will usually thank their agent. And that's another way to find out if you say, you know, my book's a bit like so-and-so, it's a bit like so-and-so, and then her agent's this one. Ah, right. She might be a good fit for me because I can say my book is a bit like so-and-so, who's one of your existing clients. That's showing a bit of knowledge and a bit of awareness of who she is, what they do, what the clients are like, and that kind of thing. And therefore, that kind of level of research into an agent is fine. So its first step is compiling a short list of all the agents you're going to target, and keeping that information up to date, because you could be ready to send your query letter out and an agent closes their list. So they do this periodically. It's where every few months they'll say, right, I'm closing for the next 3 months, so I can then work my way through the submissions that have been sent in, because it's first in, first out. So you don't want to send your book in for when they're closed. So it requires you to stay up to date. Most of them post it on their websites or on their social media. So even if you don't use social media, you can still keep an eye on the agents and have a list and see what's going on. So it's a lot of staying current, but then that's kind of essential for being in writing anyway.
Yeah. Fantastic. That gives you a good foundation to work from. So it sounds like you do for each individual agent, you're looking at writing a specific query letter just for them.
You've got to tailor it to, tailor it to their specs, what they're asking for, the number of words, the number of chapters. The query letter itself might only change a little bit. The synopsis probably won't change unless they say, I just want a one-page synopsis and yours is 2. That requires a bit more work, but there'll be some variance. So once you've got like a template for sort of 2 or 3 different versions, you'll be able to quickly fix them and adjust them so it can go out to a wider list of agents.
Nice. Preparation's key then.
100%. You've got to do your homework because you only get one chance, remember.
Yeah.
So whatever this book is, you get it's not a case of burning the bridge. It's a case of you get one chance to impress an agent with this one book. You can submit other books to them in the future. You can't revise the book and send it back to them again. So you can't say, oh, I spent the last 6 months working on it and here it is again. They'll just say no. They don't have time. If they weren't that interested the first time, this is why going to somebody, an editor, and someone who can give you that initial feedback before you send it in, to look at your query package, look at the first few chapters to say, is it up to spec? I wish I had this because there was nothing like that when I was starting out, and I was sending books in blind, thinking, I hope they're good enough. And most of the time, with hindsight, I know they weren't. But I would rather have spent like 6 months working on a book and getting it ready to when someone says, yeah, this is now of a standard that it's ready to go, rather than have to spend another year, 2 year writing a book, because you can't send that book out again. So if you're not sure about the quality of the work, if you think it needs polishing, if you think it needs a little bit of help or a bit more editing, you can hire a professional editor. You can go to one of the mentoring things through the British Fantasy Society, come to the Right Advice, where me and the other authors do stuff as well. So there's lots of other options out there as well, not just saying come to me, but there are places you can go, because if you love this book and you think it's worth pursuing and you think it has legs, you want to make the best first impression possible, not just in the query package, but in the actual chapters itself.
Yeah, fantastic advice. So if we get into the actual letter itself, like
Yes.
we've got like a solid template that we can sort of work from. So what does a template need if we sort of go through it top to bottom?
Okay, so it varies, but I typically suggest that you put all of the most pertinent information in the first paragraph. As you mentioned, in that ebook that I've written, it's got my initial query letter that I sent in to my agent, and with her permission, her feedback on what she liked about the query letter, and with the kind of back and forth between the two of us. And there are query threads on Reddit where people post their query letters up and people critique them. I think you need to get all the most important information up front in that first paragraph. You're setting out your stall so the agent knows what you've done and what they're getting from you. So these days, in terms of publishing, the other thing to be realized is, if you're doing, say, fantasy or science fiction, long-running series are currently quite difficult to sell. Anything longer than a trilogy is a really big ask in terms of the traditional space. So that's something you need to be aware of. Right now, the key phrase is a standalone with series potential, which means it's a standalone story with some threads that if you then, the book was successful, you could then get picked up and do a second one with the same group of characters and a third one and so on. It can be a trilogy, it can be a duology. If that's what it is and you don't want it to be a standalone with series potential, that's fine, but go in and say that. Anything longer than a trilogy, I would not do that. Even if you think, oh, it's a series of 4 connected trilogies, do not say that. Even if you've got it all, just don't say it. Like, if the first trilogy does really well and they go, right, let's do a second trilogy, you're like, yes, I think I have something. But like, if you go in and they're thinking, right, that's just too much, you're going to try and stick to this plan. The first paragraph is, who is the audience, in terms of the age range that you're targeting? How long is the book? How many words is it completed? What genre does it fit into, or genres? So, epic fantasy, historical fantasy, romance, romantasy, which is very, very popular these days, science fiction. So you're saying what it is. You're saying the audience, you're saying the length, and then you say whether it's, standalone, duology, trilogy, whatever it might be. So you set all that out. In that first paragraph as well, I would also say, I would give you a comparison, your comp titles. Your book is X meets Y. Now, so you need at least 2. I wouldn't go for like 6 or 7 or, 3 or 4 maybe, but I think the more comparisons you put in, the more difficult it can be to understand what the book is, because they need to know what it's like that's currently out on the market. That then tells them what the books, they can then say how well those books have sold. And then that is then enabling them to position the book when they go to editors, because editors know the numbers of how well the books have sold. Yeah. You can use the odd like TV or film reference in there in terms of comparisons, but you should lead with the books. So you could say it's, I'm trying to think of some fairly recent, sci-fi or fantasy books that I've read. I'm a very slow reader. So you could say, it's this book meets that book, but has a feeling of, the relationships like this film. So getting very specific feeling. They're saying, right, the relationships are being developed and that we saw in this film. But you need to keep it quite tight. And there again, those 2 comp titles have to be current. They have to be relevant, because if you go in and say it's Lord of the Rings meets Game of Thrones, while in terms of sales numbers, yeah, that's great, but also none of them have had a book out, well, in terms of Tolkien, for a long time. In terms of George Martin, slightly less time, but still quite a while. Trying to sell a book on the back of something that came out 20, 30, 40, 70 years ago won't work, because the market has changed so much, and it's changed from 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and it's constantly evolving, which is why the comp titles have to be recent.
Yeah. So basically, this first paragraph is the edit, like for the agents, is how am I going to sell this book? And we've got to give them all of the answers, all of the reasons why, because at the end of the day, it is business, and they've got to go out and flog it. And if it's too hard to sell, they're not going to do it, are they?
So yeah, the other thing, since COVID, I think publishers are a lot more cautious.
Mm.
The price of paper and other things have gone up. Um, the market's constantly changing. They don't always know what's going on. They're doing their best, but things can just seem to be doing well and then suddenly drop off. Hence why they're not going to sign you up for a 10-book series, because halfway through the market could completely change and then they're left with 5 books they can't sell. So you're setting out the stall, you're telling them what it is, and you're telling them how they can sell the book. Because as much as this is a creative endeavor and a creative process, and it's something that you're proud of, this novel, this story, at the end of the day, it is a business. And if the business side of publishing you don't find it interesting, well, you're going to have to get used to it, because traditional publishing or self-publishing these days, especially self-publishing, you have to have a really good business head on your shoulders as well as a creative one. So this query letter is setting out the stall to the agent, that first paragraph, what it is, who's the audience, what's the market, how long the book it is, how long the series is. The next sort of few paragraphs, you then start to tell them what the story is about. Who are the main characters? What are the stakes? What are they risking? What's the problems that they're facing, and what is the ultimate goal that they want to try and achieve? And you have to take a step back from your book. And this is really, really challenging. I don't always know when I write a book what the themes are, what it's about, or any of that, until I've gone into the book or till I get to the end of it. I don't always know. But you then have to do that in this query letter. You have to be able to step back from your own book and say, it's a story about, rather than saying it's a story about X, Y, and Z, you have to kind of say the character is going on a quest and it's about these things. So if you think about think about The Hobbit, right? It's a story about a hobbit and a bunch of dwarves that go on a massive epic quest, and all of his friends and the Fellowship of the Ring and all the rest of it, to destroy this magic ring, and throw it into Lord of the Rings is, and throw it into the Mount Doom. That's what Lord of the Rings is. Hobbit and a bunch of friends go on a quest. But then you have to take a step back and say, the story is actually about friendship, and that the smallest person in the world can change the course of the entire world. That's what it's actually about. That someone who isn't a trained warrior, who isn't a king, who isn't an elven prince, who isn't an immortal wizard, can change the face of the entire world, and that everybody can make a difference in the world. That's what the story's actually about. So it's getting that balance of the story, you have to communicate some of what that is, but also what is it about, and getting all of that boiled down into a query letter is horrible, and it's really hard, and I hate doing it, but it's absolutely necessary.
Yeah. Harder than writing the book.
I think it is. I think it can be. Which is why if you can get other people to read the book and then you can ask them a bunch of questions, you can see how close to the mark you are with your story or not. And then if you then need to adjust things, like if people aren't getting certain things, you're like, well, why not? And it's like, right, do I need to now edit the book to make those things more apparent? Is it too subtle, or they're just not understanding it? So it's really, really difficult.
Yeah. So you would obviously don't put the blurb in the book, but you're just trying to get the flavor of what it's about and the characters.
So the blurb is something completely different. The blurb is what goes on the back of the book to sell it to a reader.
Yeah.
The agent is a reader, but they are not the audience. Mm-hmm. You're explaining it to the agent in terms of it's a different kind of thing. The query letter isn't a sales tool in the same way as the back of the book, the blurb in a bookshop. That is written with more adjectives. That's written with kind of like, and how will they ever escape from this terrible trap? You don't do that in the query letter. You don't tease the agent. We'll come on to it in the synopsis, but the synopsis lays out everything. The synopsis explains the whole story, soup to nuts, and it's not a sales tool at all because it spoils everything. The query letter is a little bit of the blurb in terms of you're laying out the story, but you're taking a step back from it. So you're not giving every plot twist like you would in a synopsis. You're not giving every beat of the story. You have to take a step back from the story, which is why I think I've seen some people's query letters, they've kind of squashed the text down and down and down to get it to one page because they're trying to get as much of the information in as possible. And I keep going to my mentors and saying, my mentees and saying, right, this bit, while it's interesting to the story, isn't vital to what you're trying to communicate as part of the plot. You could say another characters are pursuing, also searching for this thing, so they understand it's not, for the MacGuffin, it's not just one person. And they cut out a whole paragraph of someone saying, oh, then they go here, looking for this thing. It's like, yeah, we get it. There are other people searching for the MacGuffin, but you don't put that in the query letter. You have to kind of, it's like reducing down a sauce when you're cooking. You're constantly having it on the boil, and it's the steam's coming off, and that's what you're trying to do with this query letter. You're trying to boil it down to its key essence and just kind of focus and say, what is the story, but more importantly, what is it about?
Yeah.
And if you don't know what your story is about, then go away and think about it and until you can understand. You've written it, you know what it's about. I find this too as well, that people say, oh, I don't know what it's about. Then I start asking them to describe a story, and then they tell me what it's about. And I'm like, well, you do know, but it's getting it in the right terms to communicate that to the agent is the key thing.
Yeah, definitely. And is there anything else that you think a query letter needs, or you could potentially put in? Like, what about if you've previously had stuff published? I always remember Ian Drury. I had like a one-to-one with Ian Drury, who's a literary. He's representing quite a few fancy authors, doesn't he? And he absolutely tore me query letter apart. And one of the things he said was, like, I'm not interested if this has come through like an indie press because it might as well have been self-published. But you do see some people on the things like, say, if you've had anything, even if it's a short story, put it in just so that we can see you've got a bit of an idea. So it's hard to find.
So it's when you're limited to space. The other key things you must put in is any relevant experience.
Yeah.
So say you're writing like an action thriller about an ex-CIA spy, Jack Ryan kind of book, it's that kind of high octane thriller, right? And at the end of the query letter, you always put a little bit of information about you as an individual, relevant and otherwise. You could say, and the relevant experience could be, I spent 20 years in the armed forces. They're going to be like, oh, right, okay. As opposed to, I'm just a big fan of this kind of genre. So it gives it more weight. It gives it more gravitas. If you've got experience of doing the thing, or one of the characters is disabled, perhaps, and you also are disabled. It's relevant experience. It's life experience you can't teach someone. If, in terms of your writing history, you could say you've had a couple of short stories published in X and Y, as long as they tie into the relevant genre. There's no point in saying, I've had 10 stories or 50 stories published in the so-and-so romanticy magazine. Here's my sci-fi book. That's not relevant. But if you say, Horizon magazine that does sci-fi, I've had 10 short stories published in that. Here's my epic sci-fi novel. Right, okay. A little bit of information about you as an individual is usually fine. Saying, who you are, where you live, what you don't need to put your age in because that's not relevant in terms of them buying the book. It sounds cruel to say and coarse to say they don't care about you as an individual. To begin with, they don't, because the work is what they care about. If the work is good and they take you on as a client, they will get to know you over a course of period of time. They'll talk to you. They'll find out about your life. But you don't go in with your life story on this query letter unless it's relevant, unless it's, I spent 25 years in the armed forces. I worked in the CIA. I've been a civilian for 5 years. I've now just started writing my first novel about, based upon a fictional character and blah, blah, blah. And you're like, right, okay. All right. I get it. Yeah. Or it could be, I've spent you could have a totally ordinary job. I work in a supermarket, but for the last 2 years on nights, I've been shadowing the police officer and going on ride-alongs with him. Like, okay, right, you've actually gone out and done something, and that's relevant experience. But so it could be if you've done a degree in something that's relevant to the book. It could be that you say, you've just graduated creative writing from the University of Birmingham, and this novel was part of your original dissertation. There again, it gives them an idea it's been revised and edited and looked at a few times and studied. So it's some agents will have manuscript wish lists. Some of them on their agency websites will post on the blogs of what they would like to see in a query letter. My agent has it on her website of what she thinks makes up the best query letters in terms of structure as well. So if you go onto Mushens Entertainment website, go through the blog, you'll find what my agent would like to see. And that's a good starter for 10 because it lays out all the different beats, all the main bits, a little bit of information about you. You want to get in and get out as quickly as possible, really. You don't want to bore them. You don't want to give them information that's not relevant. You don't want to just kind of go on and on about stuff. You want them to be interested from reading the query letter to go, okay, this sounds really cool. It's on point. It's relevant. It's current to what's going on in the market. They've done their homework. Right, now I want to read chapter 1 and see what happens. And that's what you want with query letter, to hook them. But without it being, and how will Jack ever escape from the well, ... No, that's the wrong place to do that kind of a thing.
Yeah, nice. So that sounds like the query. That's a pretty comprehensive there. Lots of great advice on for people to go away and start drafting them. But we mentioned a few things there. One of them was synopsis. And I don't like writing these days. They're a bit of a pain in the backside, to be honest.
Yeah.
So you got to try and condense the entire story with no spoilers into 1 or 2 pages usually, is it?
No, you put spoilers in.
Yeah, with all the spoilers.
With all the spoilers, yeah. So this is difficult because there again, you're still talking in some ways about the theme in what's going on in the story, but you've got to describe the whole thing without just listing the events A to Z. You've got to talk about the journey of the characters, the arc that they're going through. There's different ways to do it. I've seen people do it in terms of the start of the story running through to the end. I've seen other people do it in a style where they talk about the characters' arcs and where they start from, where they end up, and then they roll into the second character or the third character if it's multi-POV and do it that way. But by the end of the synopsis, the agent needs to see the overall arc of the story. You have to obviously finish the book in order to submit to an agent, and this shows them, 1, that you've actually done that, and 2, they can get a flavor of how you write from reading the first few chapters, but the synopsis gives them an idea of your storytelling style. Like, is there lots of cliffhangers? Are there lots of twists that they wouldn't see coming? Are there lots of red herrings if it was a crime novel? They're looking for certain things in that synopsis so they can understand a bit more about you as a writer and the way you work. Obviously, the best way to do it is to read the whole book, but this gives them a kind of cheat sheet to look at it, step back and say, right, because the other thing is you can say what you were aiming for in the synopsis, and if they then go and read the book and they read the whole manuscript and realize it's quite different, that's something else as well. They can sort of say, hang on, you were trying to do this with this character. I think we need more of this. Which I've had before. Like I've said, this character is really important. And then when it's come to my agent, she said, oh, this character doesn't have as much prominence as you've talked about. I think you need to beef it up if you think this character needs more agency in the story. And you're like, oh, right, yeah, I thought there was more there. But that's the disconnect between what's in your head and what's on the page. So the synopsis is quite a good guidance tool for you as well. But that's the problem. Taking that step back and being able to look at it objectively and see if you've hit all of those points is really hard. I can't really do it, which is why getting other people to read it would be ideal. But it's a big ask to get someone to read your entire book and say, did I do this, this, and this? And get them to answer a bunch of questions. It's really hard.
Yeah, Yeah, not a fun thing to do at all.
Yeah.
So you've got your package there, you've got your query letter, you've got your synopsis, and you send it out, and the length of time it takes to hear back can vary, but I mean, oftentimes it's quite a while, isn't it, before you're going to hear anything?
It's going to be months. Yeah, it will be months. Most agents will give you an idea on the website or on the social media or somewhere. They'll sort of talk about length of time would be typical to hear back from them. If they say right 3 months, right, and you haven't heard anything after 4 months, it's okay to send a follow-up email just to say, just wanted to check in. Have you had a chance to look at it? What's going on, sort of thing. But obviously more formal. But you've got to kind of leave them alone, really, because something could have happened. They could have got really busy with their clients who they have to look after first. And if you think about it the way around, like if you're an existing client of theirs, you want them to be looking after you first rather than somebody new who wants to be a client. So if
Yeah,
they said, oh, the big deal came through and I was busy working with this, that, and the other, blah, blah, I'll get to yours soon. And, you got to take it as a bit of kind of a good thing, really, because they're focused on their clients and serving them. It is annoying. It is frustrating. But if you get the right agent at the right time and they are interested in your book, that's what you want. If you haven't heard from them in 6 months and they'd said 3 months and they've not responded to any of your chase emails, just assume at that point it's done and move on. I wouldn't keep chasing them. If you've sent a chase email and heard nothing, and a second one later on heard nothing, then at that point it's just assume that it's a no and move on to the next thing.
yeah, yeah. I think that's the best thing to do, isn't
Yeah.
it? We calling them or chasing them down. I mean, how many queries do you think is enough before you can turn around and really like sort of question what you've submitted and whether you need to reassess what you've done? What do you think's enough in that regard?
It depends if you get any feedback. This
Mm,
is it. Most agents won't give you feedback. Some might, but a lot of them won't because they don't have time. So say you've drawn up a list of 20 agents and you send out the first batch of 5 and you hear nothing and just get straight no's. And then you send out another batch of 5 a few months later and get another bunch of no's. You're now halfway through your list. At that point, I would be like, right, rather than just send the next 2 batches and hope for the best, I would then be like, okay, do I need to have somebody else look at this? Do I need some fresh pair of eyes? Is it the query letter that's causing the problem? Is it the synopsis? Is the work ready? That's the other thing. Does it need another edit? Does it need another polish? Um, Thinking about my mentees, a lot of them have had work that needs doing. It's been nearly there, and some of them just weren't ready. I know now I can look at it within the first page and see if it's ready. And an
mm,
agent knows this as well, better than I. They can read the first page and be like, yeah, the quality's there or the quality isn't there. And it has to be a certain standard, remember, because their job isn't to polish the work for you. It's to sell the book and get it out there with an editor. So an agent might work with you to improve the story, to improve the character arc, to improve all these different things. But some agents don't go to that degree. They focus on their job of selling the book. So if the book isn't ready, they might just turn you down. And another agent might say, okay, it's not quite ready. I'll take you on as a client, but we need to work on it for the next few months. So it depends upon the individual. But there again, if you've gone through half your list and you're not sure, if you're concerned about the quality, get some other people to read it, get some friends, join a writing group, join a forum, get an editor, freelance editor, get a query package assessment and be like, can you spot anything? It could be timing. You could have got absolutely everything right. The query letter is brilliant. The synopsis is on point. The number of words, it's all right. It's all firing on the right cylinders. But the problem is the agent can't sell it because the market has changed, or an editor has just taken on a book that's very similar to yours and they don't want too many of the same things. I know of several authors who are published now who were with their agent for several years because the agent loved the book. They took it on, thought it was brilliant, polished it, got it ready, and they've sent it out, and the editors, for any number of reasons, have said no. So the author still has an agent, but that first book can't sell. It hasn't gone anywhere.
Yeah.
Recent examples I can give you are Andrea Stewart. She signed with the same agent as me at a very similar time, but it was her third book that went out on submission that sold.
Yeah.
So if you think about it, she's gone through all of that process of working on the book, doing the query letters, everything. She sends it out. Agent loves it. They try and sell it, and for whatever reason, it doesn't go. Another one is Hannah Kaner. She's also with Juliet Mushens. It was her second or third book again, and just didn't work for whatever reason. And then God Killer came out and was a massive success. So if someone reads a query, so I read, one of my mentees, they sent me the query package. I read it, and I emailed her back the next day and said, you don't need my help. I can't do anything for you. There's the odd little typo, but that's fine. The agent will look over the odd missing comma. That's not what they're interested in. I went back to her and said, there's nothing wrong. I can give you a couple of little keys to tidy up your query letter, but that's a minor thing. In terms of the book itself, it's ready. I can't actually help you. Yeah. The majority, I can look at them and say, yeah, this needs work, that needs work, this needs work. And it's just getting it absolutely the best as you can for that first impression.
Yeah. What was the experience like for you personally?
Or doing a query letter?
Yeah, going through that whole process.
Hated it. Absolutely hated it. Because I did it blind for years. There was no feedback. There was no information. There was no one to tell me if the book was ready. I just kept submitting new book after new book after new book, burn through all the agents, get little to no feedback at all, don't know why it didn't work. And then, what do you do? So I wrote a new book and another book and another book. And at the same time, I was going to events, going to conventions, listening to editors, listening to agents talk, trying to garner as much information as I can in terms of what is the market doing? What are they interested in? What are they looking for in terms of query package? So it's being part of the community that you want to be in is essential, whether it's reading the books, whether it's going to the events, but something, so what it's going to be like. Because for years, remember, I was just literally going to events, hoping to get published. And now I'm on the other side of the table and I am published, but I'm still going to the events. I'm still part of the community. I'm still talking with all these people and meeting them. So it's a good way to get yourself known, to get your face out there. And maybe you build a friendship up with people and you'll need them going forward as part of your community and your support system. So I'm friends with people now that when we were all just trying to get published, I'm still friends with them now. We can talk about this stuff of we're both published, or we're all published now. But back then it was all just like, oh, I wonder what will happen and all the rest of it. Now it's different conversations, but we're still there supporting each other.
Yeah, and it's great that you support other writers as well.
You've got to, yeah.
Thank you very much for all your work and the services that you provide. It's great. Stephen, thank you very much. It's been a really, really interesting conversation. I think we've covered it in quite a lot of detail, and I think that's going to be very helpful to a lot of people. I'm very grateful. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
If anyone wants to learn more about you and this querying service that you offer, where's the best place for them to go?
If you look up The Right Advice, spelled RITE, just Google that. You'll find the website where we do like sample edits, query package edits. If you want to read my query letter, it is in that ebook that you mentioned that's on Kindle. But if you just want to read the query letter with the feedback from my agent, if you go onto my website, which is stephen-aryan.com, and search for how I found an agent, you'll find a 2-part long blog post, my entire kind of query story. But in there, in part 2, is the query letter and with notes and feedback from my agent explaining what I set it out and how I did it. And my agent on her website has her kind of ideal query letter structure. So that's Mushens Entertainment. And you'll find what she's kind of looking for. And I think that's a good base template to work from to build yours.
Yeah, fantastic. I'll put links for them both in the description. But,
cool.
Thank you very much again, Stephen. It's been a fantastic chatting with you for the third time on the show. And hopefully we'll see you again soon.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Cheers, Richie.
Thanks everyone for listening. We'll be back very soon with a brand new episode.